A majestic wild Mustang, abandoned to his fate after a brutal wolf attack, lay with wounds so severe that even wildlife rangers doubted he would survive the night. But what transpired when a stranger appeared in the remote wilderness irrevocably altered everything known about the will to survive. Prepare for a heartwarming and challenging story about courage, hope, and the unbreakable spirit connecting humans and horses. This tale will remind you that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision to move forward despite it. It's a story of defiance, second chances, and the transformative power of love. Through Thunder's fierce determination and Ellie's unwavering dedication, we are reminded that no matter how deep the scars, healing is always possible when someone believes in you. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more inspiring tales of courage, connection, and the wonders of the natural world. Stay tuned as we dive deeper into Thunder's unforgettable journey, a testament to the power of hope and survival against all odds. Have you ever witnessed or experienced a moment of redemption that changed everything? Let us know in the comments below. The brutal Nevada winter showed no mercy as Thunder, a magnificent 7-year-old Palomino Mustang, struggled through the snow-covered hills of the Great Basin. Once the proud leader of his herd, he now traveled alone, separated during a violent storm 3 days earlier. His golden coat, once gleaming in the sunlight, was matted with sweat and dirt, his powerful muscles straining with each step through the knee-deep snow. The harsh mountain winds carried the scent of pine and ice as dark clouds gathered ominously overhead, threatening another storm that would further complicate Thunder's journey back to familiar territory. Thunder paused atop a windswept ridge, his ears perked forward, sensing danger before his eyes confirmed it. The howl came first, a long, mournful sound that cut through the whistling wind, then another and another. A pack of wolves had caught his scent, their hunger sharpened by the harsh winter that had decimated the local deer population. Their calls echoed across the valley, a primitive communication system perfected over millennia of pack hunting, each howl conveying vital information about the target's location and vulnerability. As the sun began to set behind the mountains, painting the snow-covered landscape in hues of orange and purple, Thunder knew he was cornered. Normally, he would outrun any threat, his powerful legs carrying him to safety across the open plains where his speed gave him the advantage. But the deep snow slowed his movements, and exhaustion from days without proper food had weakened him. His breathing came in labored bursts, creating small clouds in the frigid air as he assessed his limited options for escape. The first wolf appeared at the tree-line below, a large alpha with piercing yellow eyes that seemed to glow in the fading light. 2 more emerged beside it, their gray forms moving like shadows across the snow, their movements synchronized with practiced precision. 4 more wolves materialized from different directions, effectively cutting off any potential escape routes. Thunder pawed the ground, his nostrils flaring, preparing for a fight he couldn't possibly win but was unwilling to surrender without. The wolves attacked as one, a coordinated assault refined by thousands of years of evolution. Thunder reared and struck out with his hooves, connecting with one wolf and sending it yelping away with a crushed shoulder. But the others circled methodically, darting in to snap at his legs before retreating, a strategy designed to exhaust larger prey. A wolf lunged, teeth sinking deep into Thunder's hind leg, tearing through muscle. Another attacked his flank, ripping open a long gash that immediately began streaming crimson across his golden coat. Thunder fought valiantly, kicking and striking with decreasing strength as the minutes passed. His neigh of defiance echoed through the mountain pass, a final declaration of his indomitable spirit. But he was outnumbered and increasingly weakened by blood loss and fatigue. As complete darkness fell, the wounded Mustang collapsed in the snow, his once proud frame now broken and bloodied. The wolves, sensing victory, moved in for the final attack, their eyes reflecting the emerging moonlight like 6 pairs of malevolent stars. Suddenly, distant lights appeared on the horizon, artificial beams cutting through the wilderness darkness. The unexpected intrusion of human presence caused the pack to hesitate, their primal fear of humankind temporarily overriding their hunger. After a moment of tense indecision, they retreated into the shadows of the forest, their growls of frustration fading into the night. Left alone in the gathering moonlight, Thunder's labored breathing created small clouds in the frigid air. His once proud frame lay broken in the blood-stained snow, waiting for death to claim him. But fate had other plans as the distant lights grew steadily closer. Dr. Ellie Morgan was not supposed to be on this remote stretch of the Nevada wilderness. The 34-year-old veterinarian had taken a wrong turn hours ago while driving back to her small practice in Carson City after visiting a ranch client. The snowstorm had obliterated the road markers, and her GPS had failed in the mountains. Now, as her Jeep's headlights cut through the darkness, she was simply hoping to find her way back to any main road before running out of gas. The fuel gauge hovered dangerously close to empty, a constant reminder of her precarious situation. "Just my luck," she muttered, peering through the windshield at the endless expanse of snow, the wipers struggling to keep the glass clear. 5 years after leaving her prestigious position at a San Francisco animal hospital to start her own practice specializing in large animal care, Ellie still questioned her decision on nights like this. The comfortable city apartment and predictable schedule sometimes haunted her dreams, especially when she found herself in situations like this, lost in the wilderness with a storm bearing down. Her thoughts were interrupted when her headlights illuminated something unusual on a ridge ahead, a large shape in the snow and dark stains that could only be blood. Ellie stopped the Jeep, grabbed her emergency medical kit and flashlight from the passenger seat, and stepped out into the bitter cold. The wind immediately slapped her face, stealing her breath as the temperature registered at minus 15 degrees Fahrenheit on her watch thermometer. What she found took her breath away. A magnificent Mustang, his golden coat visible despite the blood and dirt, lay nearly motionless in the snow. Wolf tracks surrounded him, telling the story of the violent attack. The horse's eyes, though clouded with pain, watched her approach with a mixture of fear and resignation. Steam rose from his wounds, the warmth of his blood creating a macabre mist in the freezing air. "Hey there, big guy," Ellie whispered, moving slowly to avoid startling the injured animal. The beam of her flashlight revealed the full extent of the damage. After a quick assessment, she realized the situation was dire. Multiple deep lacerations covered his hindquarters and flanks, the flesh torn and ragged from the wolf's sharp teeth. One particularly nasty wound on his right hind leg was still bleeding steadily, the crimson stain spreading across the pristine snow. Without immediate intervention, the Mustang would not survive the night. But treating a wild horse in the middle of nowhere presented enormous challenges. One kick from those powerful hooves, even in his weakened state, could be deadly. She had seen the damage an injured horse could inflict when cornered. A colleague had lost an eye in such an encounter just last year. Yet something in the Mustang's eyes, a quiet dignity even in the face of death, compelled Ellie to try. There was an intelligence there, an awareness that seemed to transcend the typical wild animal encounter. "I'm going to help you if you'll let me," she said softly, knowing the horse couldn't understand her words but might respond to her tone. She slowly removed her glove and extended her hand, palm up, allowing her scent to reach him. To her surprise, the Mustang made no attempt to rise or flee. Perhaps too weak to fight, or perhaps sensing her intentions, he remained still as she began cleaning his wounds in the beam of her flashlight. His muscles tensed when she applied the antiseptic solution, but he didn't lash out, his eyes never leaving her face as she worked. As Ellie meticulously cleaned each gash and applied pressure bandages to the worst wounds, an unexpected blizzard rolled in with shocking speed, obscuring everything beyond a few feet in a wall of white. The temperature plummeted further, and the wind intensified to a howling gale. With no cell service and temperatures now dropping to potentially lethal levels, a devastating realization settled over her. Neither she nor the horse would survive if they remained exposed on this ridge. Frostbite and hypothermia would claim them both within hours. Looking from the injured Mustang to her Jeep, calculating the impossible logistics, Ellie made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "This is completely insane," Ellie muttered to herself as she folded down the back seats of her Jeep Cherokee, the interior light illuminating her determined face. The vehicle was her mobile veterinary unit, customized for transporting medical supplies, but certainly not designed for hauling a full-grown Mustang. Yet, as the blizzard intensified around them, she had no choice. It was their only chance at survival. She quickly reorganized her equipment, pushing cases of supplies against the front seats to create maximum space in the rear cargo area. The horse, whom she'd started calling Thunder because of the rolling storm, lay just 20 feet from her vehicle. Those 20 feet might as well have been 20 miles given his condition and the rapidly deteriorating weather. The wind now howled louder than the wolves had, driving ice crystals that stung Ellie's exposed skin like tiny needles. Visibility had dropped to less than 10 feet, the swirling snow creating a disorienting white void all around them. The temperature continued to plummet, and Ellie could feel the cold penetrating through her insulated jacket. After administering a mild sedative to keep Thunder calm and pain medication to ease his suffering, Ellie returned to her vehicle to create a makeshift ramp using an old tarp and some emergency road boards she carried for getting unstuck from mud. It was a flimsy solution, but it was all she had. She anchored one end of the contraption to her rear bumper and extended the other toward Thunder, creating a precarious bridge between certain death and possible salvation. "All right, Thunder," she said, returning to the horse and kneeling beside his head, her voice barely audible over the howling wind. She gently stroked his neck, feeling his rapid pulse beneath her fingertips. "I know you don't trust humans, and you have every reason not to, but right now I'm asking you to trust me. We're going to do this together, or we're both going to freeze to death out here." What happened next would later be described by Ellie as nothing short of miraculous. As if understanding the gravity of their situation, Thunder struggled to his feet despite his grievous wounds, swaying dangerously but remaining upright. With Ellie guiding him, one hand on his mane and the other supporting his shoulder, the massive Mustang took one painful step after another toward the Jeep. Each movement was an excruciating battle against pain and weakness, his legs threatening to buckle with every step. When they reached the makeshift ramp, Thunder hesitated, his nostrils flaring at the unfamiliar structure. "Come on, boy," Ellie encouraged, her voice cracking with emotion and cold. "Just a few more steps." She positioned herself at his side, ready to support him if he fell. Thunder pawed at the tarp, testing its stability, his survival instincts warring with his pain and fear. With a courage that defied explanation, Thunder placed his front hooves on the ramp. The structure creaked ominously under his weight, but held. Inch by agonizing inch, he made his way up the incline, his powerful body trembling with the effort. Halfway up, his back leg, the one with the worst bite wound, gave out, and he nearly toppled sideways off the ramp. Ellie threw her body against his, using all her strength to keep him balanced until he could regain his footing. "You can do this," she whispered fiercely. "Your spirit, the horse that outsmarted them all. This is just one more obstacle." With one final, Herculean effort, Thunder lurched forward into the vehicle, collapsing immediately onto the floor of the cargo area. Ellie quickly followed, removing the ramp and slamming the tailgate shut just as a violent gust of wind threatened to tear it from her grasp. The sudden silence inside the vehicle was almost as shocking as the storm's fury outside. Ellie's hands shook violently as she spread emergency thermal blankets over Thunder's shivering form. His breathing was shallow and rapid, his eyes half closed with exhaustion. "You made it," she said softly, checking his pulse again. "You incredible, stubborn, magnificent animal. You actually made it." The thermometer on her dashboard read -25 degrees Fahrenheit now, temperatures that could kill within 30 minutes of exposure. They had escaped certain death, but their ordeal was far from over. Thunder's wounds still needed proper treatment. They were stranded in a worsening blizzard with dwindling fuel, and Ellie had no idea where the nearest help might be. As she started the engine to provide precious heat, she glanced back at her unlikely passenger. "Looks like we're in this together now," she said, mapping out their next impossible challenge. As the wind rocked the Jeep like a small boat on a stormy sea, the blizzard raged on with relentless fury. Ellie huddled in her driver's seat, turning the engine on for 10 minutes every hour to conserve fuel while maintaining enough heat to keep them alive. Each time the engine fell silent, the howling wind seemed to grow louder, the Jeep rocking under its assault. In the dim glow of her emergency lantern, Ellie monitored Thunder's condition, her veterinary training warring with the impossible circumstances they faced. The Mustang lay sprawled across the cargo area, his massive body barely fitting in the confined space. His breathing had stabilized somewhat, but the severity of his wounds demanded far more care than she could provide with her limited supplies. In these conditions, the wolf bites on his hind leg and flank were the most concerning, deep puncture wounds that risked infection despite her liberal application of antibiotics. Without proper equipment to suture the largest gashes, Ellie had improvised pressure bandages using veterinary gauze and adhesive wrap from her emergency kit. "You're quite the fighter, aren't you?" she whispered, checking his temperature with her hand against his neck. He was warm, too warm. Fever was setting in, a dangerous development that could indicate infection was already taking hold. Ellie dug through her supplies and found an injectable antibiotic, stronger than what she'd already administered. "This might sting a bit," she warned as she carefully administered the injection. Thunder flinched but remained still, his eyes following her movements with surprising clarity for an animal in his condition. She stroked his neck gently, offering what comfort she could. "That's going to help fight whatever nasty bacteria those wolves introduce to your system." Outside, the storm doubled in intensity, wind gusts now exceeding 60 miles per hour according to the weather radio she kept for emergencies. The broadcast had also delivered the grim news that road crews had suspended all operations until morning. They were truly on their own until daylight, and possibly longer if the storm persisted. "Funny how life works out, isn't it?" Ellie said softly, more to keep herself company than expecting Thunder to understand. "I left California to help animals like you. Wanted to make a difference for the ranch horses and livestock that never get proper veterinary care." She laughed quietly, the sound quickly swallowed by the storm's howl. "Never thought I'd end up performing emergency medicine on a wild Mustang in the middle of a blizzard." Thunder's ears twitched at the sound of her voice, his eyes remaining fixed on her. There was something in that gaze that transcended the normal animal-human barrier, a connection forming in this shared moment of survival against overwhelming odds. Ellie had treated hundreds of horses in her career, but never had she felt such a profound bond forming so quickly. Perhaps it was the extreme circumstances, or perhaps there was something special about this particular Mustang. Around midnight, Thunder's condition worsened suddenly. His breathing became labored, and his body shuddered with chills despite the thermal blankets. Ellie's heart rate spiked with alarm as she recognized the signs of shock setting in. His system was being overwhelmed by blood loss, trauma, and the developing infection. Without intervention, he wouldn't survive until morning. "No, no, no," Ellie murmured, frantically searching through her supplies for 4 fluids and her blood pressure cuff, adapted for equine use. "You don't get to give up now. Not after everything you've survived." Her training took over as she established an 4-line in his neck vein, a challenging procedure, even in a clinic setting, made nearly impossible by the confined space and poor lighting. Her fingers moved with practiced precision despite the cold that had numbed them. As she administered fluids and additional medication, Ellie found herself talking continuously to Thunder, her voice a lifeline for them both. She told him about her childhood in Montana, where she had first fallen in love with horses on her grandfather's farm, about veterinary school, and her dreams of protecting America's wild Mustangs from the government roundups that threatened their existence, about her failed engagement to a fellow vet who couldn't understand her desire to leave a lucrative city practice for rural Nevada. My ex said I was throwing my career away to chase some romantic notion of saving animals that nobody cared about. She said, checking Thunder's pulse again, slightly stronger now, the fluids beginning to take effect. But he was wrong. Every life matters, especially yours. You're a symbol of everything that makes this country special: resilience, freedom, beauty, and strength. As if in response, Thunder nickered softly, the first vocalization he'd made since their ordeal began. Ellie's exhausted face broke into a smile. Outside, the storm continued its assault, but inside the Jeep, a fragile bubble of hope had formed around the unlikely pair. Dawn was still hours away, and Thunder's fight for survival was far from over. But in that moment, Ellie allowed herself to believe in miracles. The first light of dawn brought an eerie stillness as the blizzard finally exhausted itself. Ellie awoke with a start, disoriented after dozing off in the driver's seat. Her first thought was of Thunder, and she quickly turned to check on him. To her immense relief, he was still breathing, his condition seemingly stabilized after the critical intervention during the night. The fever had broken, and while his wounds still looked angry and painful, the bleeding had stopped entirely. "Morning, fighter," she said softly. "We made it through the night." Checking her phone, Ellie found she still had no service. The fuel gauge hovered just above empty. They needed to move soon or risk being stranded indefinitely. With the storm past, she stepped outside to assess their situation. The world had been transformed into a glistening white expanse, beautiful and deadly in equal measure. The snow had drifted against the Jeep's passenger side, nearly reaching the windows. On the driver's side, however, the wind had swept the ground relatively clear. The sun rising over the mountain revealed something Ellie hadn't been able to see in last night's darkness and swirling snow. A cabin approximately half a mile away, a thin wisp of smoke rising from its chimney. "Thank God," she whispered, her breath clouding in the still, frigid air. Help was within reach if she could somehow get there. Returning to the Jeep, Ellie faced her next impossible challenge. "I need to get help, Thunder. I'm going to have to leave you here for a little while." The Mustang's eyes followed her, his ears pricked forward as if understanding her dilemma. "I'll be back as soon as I can, I promise." Before setting out, Ellie redressed Thunder's bandages and administered another dose of antibiotics. She left him with the thermal blankets and a small container of water within reach. "Hang in there," she said, giving his neck a final stroke before closing the cargo door as gently as possible. The trek through knee-deep snow was exhausting, each step requiring significant effort. Ellie's muscles screamed in protest, still stiff from the cramped night in the Jeep and weak from minimal food and sleep. By the time she reached the cabin's porch, her legs were trembling with fatigue. She knocked firmly on the weathered wooden door, praying that whoever was inside would be willing to help. After a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, the door swung open to reveal a man in his 60s with a salt and pepper beard and piercing blue eyes that widened with surprise at finding a stranger on his doorstep. "Name's Jacob Blackwood," he said after Ellie had hastily explained her situation. "Been living up here for over 20 years. He invited her inside, where blessed warmth from a crackling fire enveloped her. As he prepared coffee and a simple breakfast of eggs and toast, Jacob revealed something that changed everything. "Did you say a Palomino Mustang?" With a star-shaped mark on his forehead, he asked, suddenly intent. Ellie nodded, surprised. "Yes, that's right. How did you know?" Jacob moved to a shelf and pulled down a worn, leather-bound book. He opened it to reveal newspaper clippings and photographs. "Because that horse you saved is Spirit, the most famous wild Mustang in these parts." He showed her a photograph of a magnificent Palomino stallion running free with his herd. Even in the faded image, there was no mistaking Thunder's distinctive markings. 5 years ago, Spirit led the last major wild herd in this region. They lived in the protected lands about 40 miles south of here, Jacob explained, his weather-worn finger tracing over a map. Then the Bureau of Land Management decided those lands were needed for cattle grazing. They organized one of the largest roundups this state had ever seen. Ellie's heart sank. She was familiar with the controversial BLM roundups that used helicopters to chase terrified horses into pens, separating established herds and family groups before shipping them to holding facilities where many languished or were quietly sold to slaughter. Spirit was different, though. Jacob continued, a note of reverence entering his voice. When the choppers came, he led his herd away from the traps. Witnesses said he actually doubled back through the BLM line, creating a distraction that allowed most of his mares and foals to escape. He became a symbol for wild horse conservation groups overnight. He showed her more clippings, headlines declaring Ghost Horse evades capture and Spirit of Freedom, the Mustang that outsmarted the BLM. There were even fundraising campaigns featuring Spirit's image, money that went toward legal challenges against future roundups. They never caught him, Jacob said proudly, but about a year ago, the sightings stopped. Most folks assumed he'd finally been captured or killed. Some said he led his remaining herd deep into the most remote regions where humans couldn't follow. Ellie sat back, stunned by the revelation that the wounded Mustang she'd rescued on impulse was actually a living legend, a symbol of wild freedom and resistance that had inspired conservation efforts throughout the state. And now he's in your Jeep, Jacob said, his eyes twinkling with something between amusement and awe. Fate's a funny thing, ain't it, Doc? As they formulated a plan to save Spirit, the name Ellie now knew she must use, she felt the weight of responsibility settling heavily on her shoulders. She wasn't just saving one horse anymore. She was preserving a living symbol of freedom that meant so much to so many. The stakes had just become immeasurably higher. Jacob's pickup truck lurched through the snow-covered terrain toward Ellie's stranded Jeep. The truck bed had been converted into a makeshift horse transport, lined with straw and blankets, the sides reinforced with wooden panels. Been following Spirit's story for years, Jacob explained. Never thought I'd actually meet the legend himself. His gnarled hands gripped the wheel with surprising strength. You did good work keeping him alive, document. Not many would have risked their life for a wild horse. Ellie gazed out at the pristine wilderness. I didn't know who he was. I just saw a creature that needed help. She paused. Now that I know, though, I can't turn him over to the authorities. They'll either keep him pinned for life or decide he's too dangerous and put him down. Jacob nodded. That's why we're not telling anyone. My place backs up against 50,000 acres of protected wilderness. Once he's healed, he can return where he belongs. As they approached the Jeep, Ellie's heart raced with anxiety. Had Spirit survived their separation? The vehicle came into view, partially covered with snow. No movement was visible through the windows. Relief flooded through her when she opened the rear door. Spirit's eyes met hers, alert and aware. He was alive, though clearly weakened. I'm back, just like I promised, she whispered, quickly checking his vital signs. His temperature had risen. The infection was fighting back. They needed to get him to Jacob's cabin immediately. The transfer from Jeep to truck proved dangerous. Spirit, despite his weakened state, still weighed over 1,000 pounds. They created a new ramp, positioning it between the Jeep and truck bed. Easy now, Spirit, Jacob murmured as they coaxed the Mustang to his feet. Spirit struggled to stand, his legs wobbling. With their support on either side, he managed to stay upright. Halfway across the ramp, disaster struck. Spirit's injured hind leg buckled, and he lurched sideways, nearly falling. Jacob and Ellie pressed against his massive body, their feet slipping as they fought to keep him balanced. Ellie looked into Spirit's eyes and saw not just pain and fear, but fierce determination. You can do this, she said quietly. Your Spirit, the horse that outsmarted them all. This is just one more obstacle. With a surge of strength that seemed impossible, Spirit lunged forward, landing in the truck bed. Blood flowed freely from reopened wounds. Ellie quickly climbed in beside him, applying pressure while Jacob secured the tailgate. Drive as fast as you safely can, she called. We're losing him. The truck lurched forward, beginning the treacherous journey back. Each bump was agony for Spirit, whose breathing had become increasingly labored. As they crested a ridge with the cabin in sight, Spirit's eyes began to close, his body growing still. "No, you don't," she whispered fiercely. "We're almost there. Don't you dare give up now." Spirit's eyes fluttered open, fixing on her face with uncanny awareness. In that gaze, Ellie saw not just a wild animal fighting for survival, but a kindred spirit whose freedom and dignity mattered as much as life itself. Jacob's truck skidded to a halt outside the cabin. The next few minutes would determine whether the legend of Spirit would continue or end forever in this remote corner of the Nevada wilderness. 3 months after that critical night, Ellie stood at the edge of Jacob's property, watching Spirit trot confidently around the corral. His transformation was miraculous. His golden coat had regained its luster, the wounds now healed into pale scars across his powerful body. His eyes sparkled with renewed vitality and that same untamable wildness that had made him a symbol of freedom. The journey to this moment had been arduous. Those first days at Jacob's cabin had been touch and go, with Ellie sleeping beside Spirit's makeshift stall, waking every 2 hours to check his condition. The infection had fought tenaciously, requiring all her veterinary skill and emergency antibiotics airdropped by a former colleague. Spirit had hovered between life and death for nearly a week before the fever broke. Physical recovery came next, slow, painful, and measured in small victories. Throughout it all, the bond between Ellie and Spirit deepened in ways she had never experienced with any animal. He allowed her to touch his wounds without restraint and nickered softly when she entered the barn each morning. "He's ready," Jacob said, coming to stand beside her. "Question is, are you ready to let him go?" Ellie smiled, though her heart ached. He was never mine to keep. He belongs out there, leading his herd, living the life he was born for. According to recent reports, a small band of Mustangs, believed to be remnants of Spirit's original herd, had been spotted in the remote valleys beyond the ridgeline. With spring arriving and the snow melting, conditions were perfect for his return. That evening, as the sun began to set, painting the mountains in gold and amber, Ellie opened the gate to the corral. She had removed all traces of human intervention from Spirit. No halter, no blanket, nothing that would mark him as anything other than a wild creature of the mountains. "This is it, old friend," she said softly, stepping away from the open gate. Spirit approached cautiously, pausing at the threshold between captivity and freedom. He turned his noble head to look at Ellie, their eyes meeting one final time. In that gaze was a connection that transcended words, a recognition between two beings who had fought side by side against impossible odds. Spirit stepped through the gate, his movements confident. He trotted a short distance, then stopped to look back. With a sudden surge of energy, the magnificent stallion reared up on his hind legs, pawing at the air in a display of power and joy that brought tears to Ellie's eyes. Then, with a triumphant neigh that echoed across the valley, he galloped away toward the wilderness, his golden coat gleaming in the setting sun. 2 months later, Ellie received a package from Jacob containing a photograph taken by wildlife researchers. The image showed a herd of wild Mustangs, led by a distinctive Palomino stallion bearing the battle scars of his encounter with the wolves. Spirit had not only survived, he had reclaimed his role as leader and protector. Ellie hung the photograph in her clinic, where it served as a daily reminder of why she had left the comfortable city practice. Beneath it, she placed a small plaque with words that summarized everything the experience had taught her. Freedom is worth fighting for, and every life, no matter how wild, deserves a chance. Spirit's miraculous survival reinvigorated conservation efforts to protect America's wild Mustangs. Ellie established a foundation dedicated to treating injured wild horses and rehabilitating them, ensuring that Spirit's legacy would continue to inspire generations. For Ellie, this experience had been more than an act of rescue. It was a lesson in healing. By saving Thunder, she had rediscovered her own strength, shedding layers of doubt and regret that had weighed her down for years. Their bond transcended words, species, and time, proving that some connections are meant to endure without explanation. As the wind carried the scent of wild sage across the land, Ellie whispered softly, You've shown me what it means to truly live. This story is a powerful reminder that miracles happen when we open our hearts to the impossible. Whether it's rescuing a wounded Mustang or simply showing compassion to those who need it most, these acts of kindness teach us that no one is beyond saving. If this tale touched your heart, please take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories of hope, resilience, and the incredible bonds between humans and animals. Share this story with someone who needs a reminder that even in the fiercest storms, there is always a chance for renewal. And let us know in the comments, what lesson did you take away from Thunder's journey? Thank you for joining us today. And remember, sometimes the smallest sparks ignite the brightest flames.